I never used to be afraid of basements. Growing up, ours was just another part of the house, unfinished concrete floor, low ceiling, shelves stacked with old paint cans and boxes my parents swore we'd go through someday. It smelled like dust and cold cement, but nothing about it felt threatening. That changed when we moved into our new house in early 2018. The house was older, built sometime in the late 1970s, but it had been renovated enough that nothing immediately stood out as wrong. My parents loved it because it was quiet and far from the city. I liked it because I finally had my own room on the top floor. The basement, though, that was the one part of the house that never felt right. It wasn't finished like the rest of the house. No drywall, no carpet, just exposed beams, concrete walls, and a single pull-string bulb hanging from the ceiling. The stairs down creaked loudly, and the light switch was at the bottom, meaning you had to walk halfway into the darkness before you could turn it on. From the first week we lived there, I noticed something strange. The basement door was never locked when it should have been. My dad was obsessive about locking doors, especially ones that led to dark areas of the house. But every morning, when I'd come downstairs for breakfast, the basement door would be slightly open. Not wide, just enough that you could see darkness spilling into the hallway. At first, my parents blamed each other. "I thought you went down there last night," my mom would say. "No, I haven't touched that door," my dad replied. They both laughed it off. I didn't. Because late at night, when everyone else was asleep, I could hear sounds coming from below my room. Soft ones. Slow ones. At first, it sounded like pipes shifting. Old houses make noise, especially at night. But the sounds didn't come from the walls. They came from directly beneath my bed. Footsteps. Not walking, shuffling. Like someone moving carefully, trying not to make noise. I started sleeping with headphones on. Things escalated about a month after we moved in. One afternoon, my mom asked me to grab a box of holiday decorations from the basement. I stood at the top of the stairs for a good minute before going down, staring into the dark. The air felt wrong. Cold, but stale, like it hadn't moved in a long time. I pulled the string to turn the light on, and that's when I noticed it. The shelves had been rearranged. Boxes stacked differently. A folded blanket I didn't recognize tucked behind a support beam. An empty water bottle sitting on the floor near the stairs. My heart started pounding. We didn't store blankets in the basement. Ever. I told myself maybe my dad had been organizing and forgot to mention it. But when I brought it up later, his face went pale. "I haven't touched anything down there," he said. That night, I woke up around 3:12 a.m. I remember the time because my phone lit up when I instinctively grabbed it. The house was completely silent. Then I heard breathing. Slow. Steady. Coming from the floor. Not pipes. Not wind. Breathing. I held my breath, listening. Then, a soft tap against the underside of my bed. Just once. Like someone testing something. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, my dad went down to the basement with a flashlight. He told us he just wanted to check the foundation for cracks. 10 minutes later, he yelled for my mom. I heard the panic in his voice before I saw it on his face. Behind the staircase, hidden by the angle of the steps, was a small door. Not a real door. More like a piece of plywood screwed into the wall. None of us had noticed it before. The screws were loose. When my dad pulled it open, there was a narrow crawl space underneath the stairs. Bare dirt floor. Low ceiling. No lights. And inside it, a mattress. Food wrappers. Empty cans. And photos. Photos of our house. Photos of me. Taken from inside. The police came. They said someone had been living there, likely for months, maybe longer. They called it a transient situation. But here's the part that still makes my skin crawl. The crawl space door didn't have any locks on the inside. Which meant whoever was living there could leave whenever they wanted. And the officer quietly told my dad one last thing before they left. There's no sign he broke in. Which means he already had a key. I moved into the house in late 2021, right after my divorce. It was a small, single-story place in a quiet neighborhood, cheap, empty, and exactly what I needed to be alone. The realtor mentioned the basement casually, like it was an afterthought. Unfinished, she said. Good for storage. I didn't even go down there during the showing. That was my first mistake. The first night I slept there, everything felt normal. Too normal. The house made the usual settling noises, the kind you expect from an older place. Pipes ticking. Wind brushing the siding. Nothing strange. Until around 2:40 a.m. I woke up because I thought I heard someone open a door. Not slam it. Not creak it. Just the quiet click of a latch releasing. I held my breath and listened. Silence. I told myself it was a dream. When you live alone, your brain invents threats just to fill the quiet. I rolled over and forced myself back to sleep. The next morning, I noticed something small. The basement door, located at the end of the hallway, was open. I distinctly remembered closing it the day before. I don't like open doors in empty houses, especially ones that lead underground. I shrugged it off. Maybe I forgot. That night, I locked it. The second night, I woke up to a smell. Not gas. Not rot. Something damp. Metallic. Like wet concrete mixed with old pennies. It was coming from the hallway. I sat up slowly, heart already pounding. The basement door was open again. Wide open. The smell was stronger now. I didn't go back to sleep. The next day, I inspected the lock. It worked perfectly. I even tested it, locked it, pulled hard, shook the handle. No issue. That night, I put a chair under the handle. At 3:12 a.m., I woke up to the sound of wood scraping across tile. Slow. Controlled. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then came a sound I still can't explain away. Footsteps. Not upstairs. Below me. Heavy footsteps, pacing directly under my bedroom. Back and forth. Back and forth. Like someone waiting. I stayed frozen until morning. The chair was still under the handle. The door was still open. I finally went down into the basement that afternoon. It was worse than I expected. The air was cold and wet. The walls were bare concrete, stained dark in places where moisture had soaked in for years. One flickering bulb hung from the ceiling, barely lighting the space. But what caught my attention immediately was the floor. Footprints. Bare footprints. Fresh. They didn't lead to the stairs. They led to the far corner of the basement, where a section of wall was partially hidden by shelves the previous owner had left behind. I moved the shelves. Behind them was a door. Not a basement door. A door set into the concrete wall itself. No handle on my side. Just a flat slab of wood with scratch marks around the edges. I called the landlord immediately. He went quiet when I mentioned the door. Then he said, that shouldn't be accessible. That night, I stayed at a friend's place. The next morning, I returned with the landlord and a maintenance worker. The door was gone. Not closed. Gone. Just solid concrete where it had been. The landlord insisted I must have imagined it. But the smell came back that night. Stronger. And at exactly 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A notification from my home security app. Motion detected, basement. I watched the live feed. The camera showed the basement stairs. Then something stepped into frame. A man. Tall. Shirtless. Barefoot. His skin looked pale and damp, like it had never seen sunlight. He stared directly into the camera. Then he smiled. And whispered something I couldn't hear. The feed cut out. I moved out the next day. 2 weeks later, I checked the news. Police had arrested a man living inside the walls of an abandoned house 3 blocks from mine. They said he'd been using crawl spaces and old foundations to move between basements at night. The article ended with one sentence I can't forget. Authorities believe there may be additional access points that have not yet been discovered. Sometimes, when I wake up at night, I still smell damp concrete. And I still check to make sure every door is locked. Because I learned something the hard way. Just because a basement door is locked doesn't mean it's the only way in. I didn't grow up afraid of basements. That fear came later. In 2019, I moved into a small rental house in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Minneapolis. The place wasn't new, but it wasn't ancient either, built sometime in the late 80s. Beige siding, narrow driveway, and a finished basement that the landlord advertised as extra living space. At the time, it felt like a steal. I lived alone. No pets. No roommates. Just me, a steady office job, and a predictable routine. The basement became my home gym and storage area. Laundry machine, shelves, an old couch I never used. Nothing unusual. At first. The only thing I found odd was the basement door. It never stayed locked. I assumed it was my fault. I'd lock it from upstairs, head to work, and come back to find it unlocked again. I blamed habit. Muscle memory. Maybe I was unlocking it without realizing. Then one morning, I found it open. Not wide open, just a few inches. Enough for light from upstairs to spill down onto the concrete floor. I stood at the top of the stairs, staring into the darkness below, feeling stupid for how uneasy it made me. Houses shift. Air pressure changes. Doors move. That's what I told myself. I closed it and locked it again. That night, while watching TV, I heard something downstairs. Not a bang. Not a crash. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Like someone was trying not to make noise. I muted the TV and held my breath. The sound stopped. A full minute passed. Then 2 more steps, soft, deliberate, followed by the faint scrape of something dragging across concrete. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the basement door. It was unlocked. I didn't open it. I locked it, backed away, and spent the rest of the night sleeping with my bedroom door closed and a kitchen knife on my nightstand. The next morning, I checked the basement in daylight. Nothing looked disturbed. No missing items. No broken locks. No open windows. The basement had no exterior entrance, just concrete walls and tiny ground-level windows that barely opened enough for air. Still, the feeling didn't go away. Over the next 2 weeks, things escalated. Laundry I left in the dryer ended up folded on the couch downstairs. Boxes shifted slightly from where I remembered stacking them. Once, I found a glass of water sitting on the basement shelf, half empty. I don't drink water down there. I installed a cheap motion camera facing the basement stairs. The first 2 nights, nothing happened. On the 3rd night, I woke to a notification. Motion detected, 2:13 a.m. I opened the clip. At first, I thought it was a glitch. The footage showed nothing but darkness at the bottom of the stairs. Then I noticed movement. A shape slowly rising into view, just the top of a head at first. Dark hair. Messy. Then eyes reflecting the infrared light. Someone was standing on the stairs. Not climbing. Not descending. Just standing there, staring directly at the camera. The timestamp showed they stood there for over 6 minutes. At 2:19 a.m., they slowly stepped backward, disappearing into the basement. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I called my landlord. He laughed. Said previous tenants complained about noises, but chalked it up to pipes and animals. When I asked if anyone had ever lived in the basement, his tone changed. No, he said quickly. It's not legal living space. That word stuck with me. Legal. That night, I stayed awake. Lights on. Camera armed. Phone ready. At 3:07 a.m., I heard the basement door unlock. Click. Then the slow creak of it opening. Footsteps climbed one stair. Then another. I sat frozen on the couch, watching the hallway. A shadow stretched across the wall. Someone was standing just out of view. They didn't come fully upstairs. Instead, I heard a whisper. Not words. Just breathing, slow, controlled, right on the other side of the wall. I screamed. The breathing stopped instantly. I rushed to the door and flung it open. The hallway was empty. Basement door wide open. The next day, I called the police. They searched the house. Found nothing. But one officer paused in the basement. He pointed at the far wall. There's a door behind this panel, he said. I hadn't noticed it before. A section of drywall that didn't quite match the rest. They pried it open. Behind it was a narrow crawl space. Inside, a mattress. Empty food cans. A phone charger plugged into an extension cord. And handwritten notes taped to the concrete. Every note had dates. And my daily schedule. When I left for work. When I came home. When the lights went out. One note read, "He doesn't lock the basement when he sleeps." The police never found the person. The landlord stopped answering my calls. I moved out that same week. 3 months later, I got an email from a stranger. No subject line. Just a sentence. "You lock it now." That's why I left. I changed my number. But to this day, I still wake up sometimes convinced I hear footsteps below me, slow, patient, waiting for me to forget. And I always check my doors. Every single night.